everyone, my name is Ben and I'm part of DVB Productions. Welcome to this rundown of how we work, and I suppose it's an insight into our sound, essentially. This will be from one of our later tracks called Why. Tell me now, it should be out at the time of this going up, but if it's not, keep your eyes peeled. Okay, so in this, like I said, I'm going to explain reasons behind my thoughts and why I do certain things. I'm going to hold nothing back. I'm going to show you everything in this project, or at least everything that's useful. And hopefully you'll get something from it. What this isn't is a basics tutorial. This isn't going to teach you how to start producing. It's more aimed at intermediate to advanced producers who maybe just looking to pick up some tips and tricks, or maybe you found that you're at a standard where you're just not getting any better and your stuff is staying at a certain level. And I've been there, and it's tough, but if you stick with it and you sort of venture further into like other people's stuff, and you watch a whole lot of YouTube, and you experiment and try new things, that's the way to go forwards. Once you've got the basics down, once you know your way around mixing tools and stuff, and you know your riff writing's on point and whatever, the next step is experimentation. And I felt extremely limited at times in the past, whereas now I think I've sort of eliminated that with trying stuff and, getting things wrong. Get things wrong to get things right. Okay, let's dive in. So we're going to start with all the percussive instruments within this track, and they are all highlighted here. This is everything to do with drums. So let's listen to the percussion just on its own. So I'll solo everything here, and it sounds like this. Okie dokie. So this beat fluctuates in the dynamics as it goes through. Some bits are more mellowed out. I mean, this is an aggressive track, so I want really, really punchy, aggressive drums. Some sections are heavier than others, and I'm a big fan of dynamics. You're going to hear me talk about that a lot. Some of my percussion I will leave out in certain sections and then smash it in, and then the sound will evolve again as more sort of instruments are added. And then I will go straight back to a plain kick, and then back into the full beat, and so on and so forth. So let's start with the kick drum. So this thing is right there. That's the name of the sample. So it's the VEC1 Punchy 01 bass drum out of a Vengeance pack. This is a kick drum I've used a lot in the past. A lot of my old tracks had this kick drum in it, and it's a good one to fall back on. I've not used it a lot, to be quite honest, recently. I just felt it was right for this sort of song. This sort of song is like, it's kind of our old sort of sound, but with our new vibe as well. So the thing I've done to the sample here is just taken the tail off it with a fade, just like that, just to make sure that when the bass comes in, the tail of the kick is out of the way, essentially. And then if we look at the processing here, so this is an EQ. I'm boosting a lot at 80 hertz. I think that is, 80, and I'm adding 6 dB at 80 hertz. Just, it's that punchy sub sort of range, just so it cuts through the mix really nicely. This is probably a lot more of a boost than I would usually add to a kick drum. I just felt for this track, I used my ears and it needed that sort of low thud. And then I will compress. So this compressor, if you look at the needle as the kick plays. So I'm taking off -5 there. It's sort of smoothing that out at a ratio of 3. Slow attack, fast release. Then we can move on to these other kick parts here. So I've got kick 2 and kick 3. And these are for fill purposes. So I can show you this one here. It's just part of the build-up. So the MIDI is just every note in the bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's eighths, I think, is it? And what I've done is cut a lot of low end out of this kick drum here. Just because I don't want anything to get in the way of the power of the main kick. I want the kicks that I use in my build-ups and like my fill kicks that you can see here, I want them to have less energy than the main kick. You can absolutely put like these fill parts, for example, they could be in the main kick channel like that. But what I'm going to find is I want the energy to sort of cut for a little while that fill plays, and then come back in and then smash back in with the main kick. So this kick drum is a different sample. It's a little bit more clicky sounding, just to add that sort of rhythmic element to the build-up. So the kick sounds like this. And like I've said, I don't want a lot of that sort of sub-range to... Yeah, you can see here the cut. There you go. So it's being filtered out with quite an aggressive slope. There is some like 100 hertz coming in through. There is some 80 and stuff, and a tiny little bit of like the 70s. So there is some sub in it, and you can pick it out in the build-up, which sounds like this. But it doesn't get in the way of the energy of the full drop. So that's the reason behind taking the low end out of that. And obviously when the drop comes in, the main kick is there and it's full power. Sweet. Then there is this one, like I've said, which is used for fills. So very, very similar idea. There we go, I can see a little bit better now. So these are used for fill parts, as I've said. It just makes things more dynamic. It makes the song more interesting to have your kick drum doing little things in your drops. This is the same sample as the main kick. It's the exact same one, but again, I'm taking out the low end. And it still has that punch down here, but everything below has been cut now, and it just means that the kick drum sounds really dynamic. So as an example, from here. So you can hear that dum 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 dum. It just cuts the low end out, and yeah. Another example here. So you can hear that pattern clearly in the full mix, but it just sort of sits a little bit further back. So in the full mix, that would sound like that. This little fill here. Yeah, so you really get that sense of the kick being like the most powerful thing, the main kick channel, and then the little fills are slightly stripped back. Dynamics. Okay. Let's get on to the percussion now. So this section here, these channels from there to there, is what I call the back percussion, and it's sort of like the core percussion in the background. And yes, we use loops. I went through this topic with Brad Refresh on his podcast, and I said, yeah, we do use a lot of loops, but we get the loops to... They all have their sort of sound, and when they come together, they make a nice sound that has like different elements to it. What we don't do is pick loops that sound exactly the same, and then the same, and then the same. So all these have their own sort of sound, and they add up to make a nice picture. So first loop sounds like this. Sort of mellowish. Then we've got this that sits on top of it. So those two together, what this second one does is adds a lot of groove to that first loop. So together they sound like that. Number 3 would be this one. So that's sort of more top end, and it's got obviously the clap in there. These 3 together sound like this. So you can see already that the loops sound very, very different from each other, and they all add something to the party. Number 4 sounds like this. And that loop is very, very famous. I think everyone has their own version of that thing. That's just our little cut of it. And to be honest, it doesn't sound the best quality. But in the context of this, it does work. So those 4 together now. It just adds a little hum of flavour in the background of this percussion. And then last but not least, we've got this one with the little skippy hi-hats, like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All together, the back percussion sounds like this. So, yeah, they all have their own little job in that sound, and it works. So the processing on these this is fairly standard for me. You're going to see this a lot through this rundown, where I'll cut everything below a certain point and just be sort of selective of where I want the frequencies to sit. On that one, so I've got a filter down there to cut the very tops off. Maybe it was a bit too bright. Number 3, being very selective with that. So only sort of the upper mids allowed to come through. Here I've got a dip at 2K. 2K is a problem area for me. I just hate 2K overall. And I won't completely cut it out of everything, but it's one of them frequencies that resonates my ears in the wrong way. I really don't like it. So this loop without this EQ sounds like this. And then with. So I've just sort of dimmed down a bit of harshness out of that thing, and I didn't need much of the top end, and I definitely didn't need anything down here. And I've just got rid of a problem frequency that obviously I found during the production of this song. This one, again, just taking off the real tops, because there's a lot of high end in this part here that I'll show you next, the top percussion parts. So this part doesn't really need a lot of high end. So those parts, the back percussion with the kick drum, sounds like this. Awesome. The next thing that goes on there is the top percussion parts. I'll just show you the mix without the top percussion, just so you can see what that does. If I turn this off and I turn the hat off, we have this. So this is the loops we've just been through, and the kick drum, and obviously the rest of the song. So I'm just cutting out this top percussion part here in the hi-hat. So this on its own sounds great, but in the full context of the mix, this isn't a really aggressive song, and you'll get to know it a little bit more as we go through this in the episodes. There's a lot going on. So it just needed a bit more energy up there in the higher range. So the top percussion parts are really the top loops that sit at the forefront of the percussion mix. So we've got this first one here that sounds like this. So there's a lot of hi-hat in there, and then the second one sounds like this. Okay, these two are fairly similar, but you can still pick them out when you play it together. And they sound really good together. They don't clash or anything. There's no harshness in them, so that is all good. So this is when the full percussion is in. So those loops, I'll play it first without them and then add them in, and you can see how more present it gets. Cool. Then we've got this hi-hat. Yes, there are a lot of hats going on, and I've seen comments before of people saying, I've shown our projects before and stuff like that, and I read one comment once that said, I think you need some more hi-hats in that song, mate. And yes, we do use quite a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of hi-hats going on already, but just one more hi-hat isn't going to hurt anyone, is it? And this does a lot, this. So again, I'm being very selective over what I'm allowing to come through here. Cutting off a bit of the top, and then just the sort of very high mids to the lower highs, if you will, is able to come through. I'm going to play this again, and then I'm going to turn the hat off. And if you are listening on some studio monitors or some good quality headphones, you will be able to pick this out. So I'll play it first with, and then I'll turn it off, which is when it goes grey. Okay, so with. So yeah, this hi-hat sits nicely on top of the top percussion, and the top percussion sits nicely on top of the back percussion, and the kick drum is the heartbeat of the song that is always at the forefront, especially in the sub-range. I love layering things together. It's all song specific, by the way. This is just one way. This song needed this, I felt. And other songs we will use less percussion than this, but in this particular song, this is how we did it. Okie dokie. It's worth mentioning as well that I do have some samples that I will reach to and I know well, and that just comes with experience from doing it a lot. Everyone has like a little library that they build up of useful sounds that they pluck out every now and then. So, for example, these top loops, these came from a project I did with Heads Up, which the names escaped my brain just now. But yeah, I knew these sort of loops, I knew the sort of sound that they have, and I thought, well, let's try that, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, we'll move on. So I imported these in from another project, and they just sat on top of this really well. A little bit of fade work, like I say, take the lows out and stuff like that. General processing. I'm not doing an awful lot of processing, to be honest. I'm just being very selective with the frequencies I want to come through. I'm making sure nothing is getting in the way of the kick, and I'm making sure that the kick is nice and fat, and it's always at the forefront of the mix. Okie dokie. So the crashes. So we typically have two crashes going on in a song. So we've got a crash short that sounds like this. And we have a crash ambient that sounds like this. So this one has a nice reverb on it. It's nice. It's a nice long tail, and it adds to like the sort of white noise effect when it hits. Together they sound like this. All good, and I'm being very selective over the frequencies once again that I'm allowing to come through. Some of the top end taken off there, and everything sort of below 2K is filtering out on a medium sort of filter slope. And then a reverb. This is just Logic's stock reverb. I've got the wet at 40%, and this is just a typical concert hall sort of sound. So without that reverb, and then with. It's minimal, but it does add something in there, and it's just about small adjustments with our stuff. I love taking time over things and making sure that tiny little details are right, and it does really add up to the final sound. It really does. Okay, the next thing are these fills here. So there's two samples. One sounds like this. So kind of filtering up there, and then this one. Okay, together they both sound like this. So they complement each other well. Again, taking off everything that's low, and with this one, same sort of thing. So nothing's getting through below 100 hertz there. Again, an idea of dynamics. I don't want these fills to be absolutely blasting, because they're going to take away from the kick drum and stuff like that. So here, when they both play, for example, the next thing to come in is the kick drum, and if the fills have as much low end in as the kick does, it sort of undermines the kick. It's like the kick drum's disappointed that he's not the loudest thing. So yeah, that's the idea behind cutting all the low end out of everything. I typically just have low end in my kick and my bass, and then everything else sort of sits upon that. Again, it's like the idea of layers. And then the final thing is a big snare, and that sounds like this. Lovely jubbly, and I will use a big snare a lot of the time, and it's just an introduction to the parts. It's like 1, 2, 3, bang, it's like, oh, the next section's coming in here now. So the fills with the big snare. There you go, and the way I process that, again, sort of a medium curve here. There is a little bit of low end allowed to come through, and I just boosted the sort of mid-range there just to make sure it cut through the mix. And that is going to my delay bus. I send a lot of things by bus. Not all the time. Sometimes I'll just slap a delay or a reverb on a specific channel. And other times, what my sort of go-to thing is to bus out. So this has been bussed into a quarter delay, which is down here somewhere. And there we go, this one. And yes, I am well aware that it says a quarter delay, and I have Dom to thank for that. Yes, clearly Dom struggles with spelling, but it's all banter. So this is a stereo delay, a tape delay, and it's just Logic standard. Again, the idea is that a delay is just a delay. FL Studio will have a stock delay. Valhalla have delays and stuff like that. There are so many different delays out there. So again, don't think that, oh no, I'm not going to get that sort of effect because I don't have that delay. That's not how it works. They all do the same jobs, okay? And then, if you haven't ever EQ'd your delays and your reverb sends, try it, because it's a way to cut out a lot of the mud. So this is on the actual delay reverb channel itself, sorry. So everything that comes to this reverb here that I send via bus, so you can see here, bus 5, bus 5, bus 5, all runs down here. I'm actually being very selective with what bits of that sound is allowed to get through into the reverb. And yeah, I've kind of been doing that for quite a while. If you haven't done that before, try it, because it's pretty cool. Okie dokie. Oh yeah, the snare. So the snare drum just rolls up every now and again. It's pretty standard, isn't it, for this sort of music? So pattern looks like that. Lovely. There you go. Cut out everything below. Boost the tops a little bit to help it cut through. And it has a filter on it. Again, this is Logic's filter. I love this one. It's good for everything. The way I like to set my filters is put the resonance to 40%. What the resonance does is it adds a bell on top of the cutoff sweep. So when you ride through the cutoff like this, the bell sort of travels all the way through the frequencies, and it raises those frequencies as it travels. You can get some really eerie sort of weird sounds if you play with this resonance, and it has its own vibe. Like, for example, if I had it at 100%, it's like the aliens have landed. And that definitely has its place somewhere in music, but it's just not here. Okay. And then, again, I'm bussing that out to reverb. I always add reverbs to my snares, just so that when they end, they don't end abruptly. So if I turn the reverb off, I mean, it's just overly dry. Like, the snares are ending really, really abruptly, and that's not how a real snare drum works. You hit the snare drum, you get the skin rumbling, you hear the strings on below that rumble, you hear the reverb of the room. So that to me is not a very natural sound, so I'll just add a bit of natural sort of stuff back into it with the reverb. Okay, that's everything to do with the beat. Again, it's worth mentioning that it's all about the idea of dynamics. I mean, you can see here that there's pieces missing here. There's pieces missing here. And it just keeps the song moving along by doing so. So at this point, at this part of the song, it sounds like this. which sounds killer. It sounds really aggressive. It sounds nice and fat. But I've still held back from the percussion, and I've held back to parts of it. So that part there, that was just on this 4, and this second top loop, I've just held those back, and they're not playing in that section. So it's just an idea of another gear. When this synth part comes in, the percussion just edges up a notch, and it's like it's gone from gear 9 to gear 10 now, because this part is actually it's meant to be the fattest part of this song. This sort of Russian, well, you can call it a Russian donk type thing if you want. I mean, I'm going to go through this in the next episode. But yeah, it's just to keep the song interesting and moving along, and the idea that the song evolves and changes rather than everything just staying full whack all the time. Yeah, so I'll play it from here. So you can hear that percussion just for a bar, then the fills will play, and then you'll hear that the loops come in, these ones here, and everything's at, like I said, gear 10. So from that, right now. Awesome, just on its own, so you can super pick that out of what it's doing. Just get everything here that's to do with the beat. Okay. In fact, I left out the big snare there. One more time for Bants. Yeah, so you can hear it there. You can hear the fact that this sounds great and it really works with this heavy part, but I've just held back a little bit until the synth kicks in, and now everything's fat and everything's in there. Awesome. So that is how we will build a beat a lot of the time, just using loops. And I use loops basically for, well, the first reason is time. Me and Dom get 3 hours a week in the studio, and it's not an awful lot. And if we sit there building our own custom loops from beginning to end, we're going to be there for hours, and not a lot is going to get done, if you will. And also, it's a great way to get a sound. Everyone does it. It's just you want that sort of sound really quickly. You can get it by using percussion loops, and everyone does it, from the big producers to everyone that's learning. It's just one of those things. Okay, in the next episode, I'm going to take you through our processes and ideas behind building a bass for Bounce. Bye-bye.